Hey everybody, and welcome to today's video. I hope you've been great. You've been enjoying the first two videos that were about Daniel chapter 5. How have you found it? Did you find anything interesting? Going back to read for yourself? Let me know in the comments, let me know. And then thank you again as always to everyone that has watched the video, shared, subscribed, liked. Your participation is very encouraging and very helpful. So today we're looking at Daniel's response. I think what he said to the Belshazzar, and possibly the tone with which he said it, something to examine for ourselves. So I'm actually looking forward to this one. So let's go. So Daniel chapter 5, we're looking at 17 to 24, so 8 verses. Reading verse 17, then Daniel answered and said before the king, let your gifts be for yourself and give your rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing to the king and make known to him the interpretation. Just pause there. I feel personally that at this point Daniel couldn't be bothered. Like, he didn't really care for anything anymore, any gift, any reputation. He was already probably very wealthy, given how high he ranked during Nebuchadnezzar's reign. And also, it's like he had seen enough. Like, I'm not impressed by you. I'm not impressed by your gifts. I'm not impressed by what you have to offer. I will give you the reading and I will give you the interpretation, and I don't need any of your gifts. You can give somebody else. I don't care. I couldn't be bothered. I couldn't care less about these things you're offering me. Verse 18, O king, the most high God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father a kingdom and majesty, glory and honor. So we know that after Nebuchadnezzar returned to his kingdom, God gave him greater honor than what he had before. Verse 19, and because of the majesty that he gave him, all peoples, nations and languages trembled and feared before him. Whomever he wished he executed, whomever he wished he kept alive, whomever he wished he set up, and whomever he wished he put down. But when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. Then he was driven from the sons of men. His heart was made like the beast, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. They fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God rules in the kingdom of men, and appoints over it whomever he chooses. So I think, like Daniel's saying here, God has a pattern. Usually, if you read every time God sends his prophets to warn Israel, he would always go back to their history and say, this is what I did for you. This is what I did for you. This is what I did for you. But however, see how all that has led to where there is no match between what I've done and your walk with me and what is happening now. And that's kind of similar to what Daniel has done here. He recounted his history to say, this is what happened to your father, and this is what has happened to you. There's definitely a gap somewhere, and where is that gap? How did you arrive? How did you make that jump from what has happened to where you are right now? So verse 22 answers that, where it says, but you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, although you knew all this. So then we can now answer last week's question of Belshazzar not knowing who Daniel was, because Daniel was alive when all this happened, and from what he's saying now, Belshazzar at least knew the history of his father. I mean, it would have been such a remarkable thing for a human being, not just any human being, the most powerful person in the kingdom, to be made to behave like an animal for 70 years. It would be in the annals of history. And I think for me personally, it'd probably be interesting to see if there's any records or any paintings or anything that's any scientific discoveries, or excavations of archaeology that shows that thing actually happened. I think that would be very interesting. If you want, or if you found anything from before, please feel free to comment. Verse 23, and you have lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven. They have brought the vessels of his house before you, and you and your lords, your wives and your concubines have drunk wine from them. And you have praised the gods of silver and gold, bronze and iron, wood and stone, which do not see or hear or know. And the God who holds your breath in his hand and owns all your ways you have not glorified. This reminds me of when Jesus was telling the people, don't be afraid of someone that can kill the body. Be afraid of God who can both kill the body and cast the soul in hell. So apportion your fear correctly, essentially. Then the fingers of the hand were sent from him, and this writing was written. So that's Daniel 5:17 to 24. So let's carry on with the sort of text from this section. It says, Daniel wasn't interested in the king's 3-part gifts and rewards, symbols of royalty and authority. His response could as well have been, you can shove it where the sun don't shine. Like, I really don't care. He was still going to read and interpret writing on the wall to the king, reward or no reward. These 8 verses are the preamble to Daniel actually reading the writing. Verse 17, like his 3 guys did at the fiery furnace, Daniel did not hesitate to answer the king bluntly. Even though he had waited 1 hour after hearing Nebuchadnezzar's dream in chapter 4, verse 19, he was more direct with Belshazzar, like his buddies had been with Nebuchadnezzar. So, in Daniel chapter 4, we see that when Nebuchadnezzar told Daniel the dream, he was astonished for 1 hour and held his peace, didn't say anything. And he kept repeating throughout his explanation of, my lord the king, my lord the king, my lord the king. But in this one, it's like, even calling you my lord the king is an insult of myself if I did that. That's kind of the vibe Daniel is giving off in these verses. Comparing these verses with chapter 2, verse 48 reminds us that there is a time to receive gifts and a time to refrain from it. We can see also that in Ecclesiastes 3, verse 1 to 8, which talks about there's a time to, a time to, a time to. For example, Elisha asked Gehazi if it was the time to be receiving gifts when he went after Naaman to collect what his master had initially refused as rewards for his healing. So that's in 2 Kings chapter 5. We must learn to distinguish when we should freely give of our God-given gifts and talents and when we should charge or receive a reward for it. And this can sometimes be difficult to discern if we've not prayed and received that spirit of discernment, or we're not in tune with the Spirit of God to know when. Situations might look the same, but actions and responses are not always the same. It is also interesting to note that Daniel was internally, not externally motivated to use his gifts. But first, he laid the king's sins before him, which were that he had no fear of God, he hadn't learned from his father's deposition and later restoration, because his heart was lifted up and his mind hardened in pride. He hadn't humbled his heart despite knowing all that had befallen his father. He had desecrated the Lord's vessels. He had praised the no gods of earthly materials, and he had not glorified God who had his breath in his hands. So that was what Daniel did first. Listed all the things he had done wrong before he even went ahead to read the writing. Verse 18, despite Nebuchadnezzar being a dictatorial terror, God gave him a kingdom and majesty and glory and honor. It is reminiscent of Romans 13 verse 1, which says, there is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God. Like God did with Pharaoh, he used Nebuchadnezzar to show the world that he ruled in the kingdom of men and that he appoints over it whomsoever he wills. Verses 18 and 20 show us that God humbles the proud by removing that which first caused them to be puffed up. Nebuchadnezzar got stripped of his glory. A mind puffed with arrogance, verse 20, results in the mind of a wild animal, verse 21. So that's from different translations. From verses 20, 21, and 23, the correct attribution or praise to the right parties or stakeholders in any company is crucial for fostering longevity and loyalty. And this idea of allowing things, success get to somebody's head is reminiscent of King Uzziah in 2 Chronicles, where we read that God had been with him, God has helped him win wars, God has done everything he needed to do. And then the Bible talks about the glory gets into his head, all his accomplishments, all his wins get into his head. And God wasn't happy at all. And then Uzziah, instead of him, repenting and doing what he needs to do, he then went into the temple because he was arrogant, went to the temple to sacrifice on the altar, to burn incense on the altar. And the priests were warning him that, okay, you're not supposed to be here. This is not your jurisdiction at all. But he rebuffed the priests, and then God immediately, in that instance, sent leprosy, a skin disease, on him straight away. And because he was defiled, he couldn't stay in the temple, so he had to be removed. Once he was removed, he didn't appear in the temple of God ever, because we know that from the Mosaic law, nobody with any skin disease could enter into the temple of God, because that was just pure defilement. So there's a risk sometimes of when we've accomplished something, when we've done well, that it gets to our head. I think once we had any degree of success, as much as we can, just humble ourselves to counteract any pride that might come in. The Bible talks about Paul saying, because of the abundance of revelations that was given to me, and to avoid him from falling into pride, a messenger of Satan was sent to buffet him. There's always a need to be quite careful once we've experienced success. Those immediate times or minutes or hours or days following the success, depending on how big it is, are very key times where we need to guard our heart very diligently. I once heard or read a story of a pastor who, after he's had a powerful ministration, would go home and kind of clean the floors and sweep the floors, to ground himself in his humanity and know that he's just an instrument being used by God. And I think it's so key. So there's that side of pride coming in, and there's also a window of virtue has gone out of you, and there might be weakness. We see that with Elijah after he had called on fire from heaven and killed the prophets of Baal. A threat from Jezebel just did him in. Just literally did him in. And I feel for that was probably like virtue had gone out of him and he hadn't had time to refresh. So he started running away, and God tried to remind him. God sent the angel to feed him, sent the raven to feed him. That didn't seem to have cured whatever emptiness or depression or heaviness he came into at that point. So the prayer here is, Lord, help me to remain humble before you, no matter how much royal greatness and majestic honor you place upon me. It is very crucial and very important. Amen. Verse 24, we realize that it was God who sent the hand to write on the walls in Belshazzar's palace. So again, on this one, we have 3 questions. First one is, was Belshazzar sin that he didn't glorify God, or that he used the Lord's temple vessels wrongly, or that he gave praise to all idols, or all those 3 things? I think it's all 3 combined. What do you think? So the second question is, what language did the hand write in that all the wise men of Babylon could not read or interpret it? Was it a new language? Was that the first installation of tongues as we know it, And then the third question is, how did Daniel know what had happened in the palace, since he was neither with the lords nor with the wise men of Babylon? Did he know it by divine revelation? When he got called into the palace, he saw that he recognized the vessels, maybe, as vessels that were meant to be, used for priestly duties only in the temple at Jerusalem. So, or had God revealed to him to say, this is what's happening, and this is why you're about to be called. And then he wore his suits and then marched to the king's palace. There was a message we listened to at Wolfbeck earlier this year by Bishop Julian Kuhler, where he talked about Daniel just waiting for them to come and meet him in the house because he knew that something was up in the palace. God probably showed it to him. So yeah, let me know what you think of the questions. Let me know what you think of this text. As always, try and read it yourself. Get the book to help you in the life of Daniel. The link to get it would be in the description. Till next video, enjoy the rest of whatever it is you're up to. God bless you. Stay connected with the word. Stay true to the word. Don't allow pride have any place in your life. Don't give the devil a foothold, a chance. Always, always, always give glory to God. Use the thing he has given you for the right purpose. And God bless you in everything you do. Take care. Bye.